Okay, so our topic was minorities during World War II, and I'm going to start by talking about the African Americans. And their time in war was definitely not easy. They had a rocky road ahead of them as they were very segregated, they were discriminated against. It was just a very judgy time, and especially with them trying to help, it just was just crazy how people treated them. Even FDR, the president at the time, um, he was having second thoughts about even letting them fight. And when people eventually pressured him into letting them fight into the war, saying, they should be allowed to fight. Why wouldn't they? That's extra help. And not only that, they want to help their country. Why shouldn't they be allowed to fight? Eventually, he gave in and said, okay, they can, but that didn't mean that they had an easy time, as they were continuously harassed. Not only that, but they were segregated from everybody. They had different bases, different hospitals. They weren't even allowed to be near each other. It was just a very crazy time. And it was very sad, especially with all the help that they did do. I think it's very important to note down that they benefited us a lot. You have three very major groups that helped us out. You have the Tuskegee Airmen, who were the first African American military aviators in the United States Armed Forces. They destroyed a total of 274 of the Germans' aircraft and flew almost 1,600 combat missions, which is insane. That is a lot. And with all of the discrimination and segregation they were getting, it's just incredible to me how they helped so much. Then you also have the 761 Tank Battalion, which was the first Black division to fight on the ground. They joined General George Patton's army in Europe, and they helped to rescue 30 towns in only half of a year. That just shows you how strong they were and how they were able to persist through all the Germans and get the job done. They've rescued 30 towns that were under Nazi control. It's just insane. And then lastly, you want to take note of the Red Ball Express, which is something I feel like doesn't get enough credit for. It was basically a group of Black men that would go and drive supplies out, like weapons, food, and other things, to armies, like General George Patton's army, driving almost 400 miles even sometimes in pitch black to get them what they needed, which was very important. And so I definitely think it's important to note them. This brings me to my next point. When I think of James G. Thompson and what he did, the thing I think of is Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and how much they did and how they kind of preached the same thing in a way. You have James G. Thompson, who is basically saying, we shouldn't be segregated. We shouldn't be treated the way we are. We should be equal. We want to help out. We want to be one whole. That's what Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King were trying to do. They were trying to show the people, just like James G. Thompson wanted to show the people, that we should all be equal and how there should be no separation. It doesn't matter the color of our skin. It should be what we're trying to do as a whole. And I think that is why it's so important to note that it was such a major issue, because even after everything that all these people did with claiming how they just wanted to help out, they were still being treated like they didn't matter, which is not okay. And so that's what I think of when I think of James G. Thompson. It's very important to note that the reason 550,000 Jewish men and women served in the army and wanted to fight during this war was not only to help fight for their country, but was also to help their people out. Everything going on in the Holocaust was just very devastating to hear for them, hearing that their people were being put into gas chambers and burned to death and separated from their families and put in all these concentration camps, and they wanted to stop that and set them free. And so they wanted to fight for their people, and they also like to use the Star of David as a symbol to show the Germans basically that they wanted to fight against them and they were going to do whatever it took to win their war. And they wanted the Germans to know that they were defeated by Jewish people, the people that they were torturing. It's also important to note the Ritchie Boys, who were very beneficial to the United States during this time, because they were put into these camps where they would learn basically skills on how to learn this German language. That way they were able to understand the plans of what these Germans were going to do, and the United States was able to be one step ahead of them and understand what they were going to do next. That way they can plan what they wanted to do and what steps they were going to take to defeat the Germans. So that was very beneficial to them.
Mexican Americans were another minority during World War II. By 1940, people of Mexican descent in the U.S. were twice as likely to have been born and raised in the States than not. Latinos served in all elements of the American war. They served in ground and sea-bound combat units, and as fighter pilots, also bombarders. One Mexican-American fighter pilot who served in the war was Sylvester Herrera. He was a private first-class pilot who received the Medal of Honor. During this time, Mexican Americans were looking for new opportunities in our nation. In exchange for their service in the war, they were offered to apply for citizenship by the U.S. military. This situation in America historically can be connected to modern day, similar to illegal immigration. Kids and parents separated and kids being sent to be raised in orphanages. Japanese Americans were another minority, and they played their own role in the Second World War. About 33,000 Japanese Americans served in the military during and immediately after World War II. They made uniforms and parachutes. One thing about Japanese Americans was that they loved their country enough to serve, as seen in the picture to the right down here.